It is 6:08, and if the clerk could do the roll call.
Here.
Blanchard, can you hear us?
Here.
Crow?
Here.
Ryan is absent at this point. Sweet.
Here.
All right, ma'am. Madam Chair, we have 4 members present.
Thank you. And then if I could have a motion to approve the agenda.
I'd like to make a motion.
And could I have a second?
Second that.
And roll call, please.
Roll call vote. Forsberg,
Yes.
Blanchard, Stephanie, you're muted. We're voting on the approval of the agenda.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, yes.
Thank you. Commissioner Kroll
Yes.
and Commissioner Sweet.
Yes.
We have 4 yeas and 1 absent.
Okay, so
So the motion passes.
the agenda is approved, and then the next item is the approval of the minutes.
And apologies, I do not have those minutes in time for this meeting.
Okay, so we'll go to the next item, public comments regarding items not on the agenda.
Seeing no public comment.
Public hearings prior notice,
We have none.
consideration of site plans.
We have none of them, Madam Chair.
Okay, so we'll be going on to commission business, and item 1, resolution 25-01 denying the application to rezone waterfront resub number 1, lots 2 through 4, block 13, from commercial business district to waterfront commercial residential. And then I would like to pass it on to the city manager to give an explanation.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The next steps for the process. Application to allow appeal time to start. However, further discussion there is another path. There's kind of 2 paths that can go forward. One is that the commission would approve the resolution denied and start.
Sorry, Heidi, I can't hear anything you're saying.
Is this better?
Yeah, much better. Sorry about
Okay.
that.
No, it's great. Thank you. So if you didn't catch the earlier part, we're on the resolution to deny the application to rezone. And there's kind of 2 parts to this process. So one is that we need to either close out the application so that the appeal timeline will start. There's a 30-day timeline in code where the applicants can appeal the decision. And that would go to the Board of Adjustment. However, in discussing this process internally and with Chair Sweet, there is another option if the Planning Commission wanted to postpone the decision for the resolution in order to further work on criteria 7, which if you can see on that resolution and it was what was discussed at the Seldovia Planning Commission, or sorry, Seldovia City Council meeting. That was a big part of why the ordinance failed. So you guys referred the application to the city council to pass. In that discussion, the ordinance failed. And they cited that during the meeting that that number 7 was not complete. And so the other option besides just denying the application by approving the resolution and starting the appeal process would be to complete number 7, work on that criteria, why it's in the best interest of the public, and then resubmit that to the council and ask them to reconsider their decision with new information, as well as to provide more findings of fact back based on their decision, which was another piece that wasn't fully completed. So that's the question to the commission, is if you guys want to close this down by approving the resolution, or if you'd like to work through and try to provide more information for number 7 and send it back to the city council to reconsider. And we did reach out to the applicant, to Miss Martin, and she is interested in seeing it referred back to the council, and stated to myself and Chair Sweet that she would like us to exhaust all avenues possible with this application before it's closed. So those are the kind of the 2 options on the table. And if you have questions, definitely let me know.
So at this point, I'd like to open it up to the commissioners for any questions, any thoughts about this. So if you could just indicate if you want to speak, Commissioner Postberg.
Yeah, what's this number 7 thing? I'm lost on that one.
Yes, thank you, through the chair. So if you remember, and I believe you were present when this was sent to council, the application to rezone has to meet 7 criteria according to on page 12, 13. According to the Seldovia Municipal Code. So if you look at page 12 and 13 is your findings. But let me find where that actual criteria is. So in that discussion, you guys looked at all 7 criteria, and then you provided a finding back. And that was sent to council for the recommendation to approve the application. However, in that discussion with the council at the public hearing, the ordinance failed to amend the rezone. And one of the items that they spoke to was that number 7, which states the public hearing provided an array of opinions, both pro and con, on what is in the best interest of the public. That was one of the big issues discussed, was that didn't actually address the criteria in the code. And number 7 is, did we find it? On page, looks like that might be a 19. It states under staff analysis, number 7 is it is in the best interest of the public, considering the effect of development permitted under the amendment and the cumulative effect of similar development on property within and in the vicinity of the area subject to the amendment and on the community, including without limitation effects on the environment, transportation, public services and facilities, and land use patterns. So addressing that topic, if you guys are interested in doing that, You can postpone approving the resolution or postpone any action, I should say, on the resolution in order to address number 7.
Um. So does commercial lots pay extra for their water and sewer, eh?
Correct, because they have at least a base rate commercial rate because they're a commercial purpose first and then a residential or secondary purpose, whatever it is. There's always a commercial component to water and sewer. They can't just be residential.
Right. Huh.
Does, does anybody else have any questions or feedback?
I guess I'm wondering what was the lack of information? I thought we did have the public hearing and went through the public responses. Was that not enough?
Through the chair, yes, the public responses and the public comment was provided to the city council, and as noted from the commission, and attached as part of the recommendation with your findings for number 7, it stated the public hearing provided an array of opinions, both pro and con, on what is in the best interest of the public, and so the discussion on the council level was that didn't meet the criteria of proving that it's in the best interest of the public. Right? That doesn't show that it's in the best interest. There was an array back of both. So that would be on the council or on the commission if you wanted to continue to pursue this and send it back to the council, is to show that it is in the best interest of the public. To button that piece down, because it wasn't actually.
Well, would that entail having more public commentary or encouraging more citizens to comment on it?
It could, and that could be something you could ask people to come to the next meeting. Like you could provide notice to all the same people that had notice before if you want, or have, if there's more information that you wanted staff to provide. I'm not sure what it would be at this point in time. But we could provide more information if it was needed. And then you could have that discussion if you think that that's viable in order to address that issue. If not, and you guys want to approve the resolution, then the resolution closes that application. It'll open up the appeal timeline for the applicants. We'll notify the applicants and they'll have 30 days to appeal. So either way, it's an option if you guys want to work on it and you feel like there's an interest and that there's a path forward through there. If not, and you just want to close it, that's their avenue as well.
So one of the things that I'll do this just to kind of go through the criteria. So it says in the best interest of the public. So one of the things that has happened is in 2014, the public defined what their interest was with the comprehensive plan, and they provided a preferred use for that area as the SLU district, which is basically equivalent to the waterfront commercial district. And in the way that the town center was described, it was described excluding this area. So it was at least thought of in terms of what the public thought at that time. So I just wanted to call that to your attention. Then, considering the effect of development permitted under the amendment, there's no additional development being asked for. So I think this part of the code is in some ways if you were going to do a new development, but it's so that some of this verbiage I think is related to that and may not be directly applicable to the situation. So it's just a reclassification of existing structures. And then the cumulative effect of similar development on the property within and the vicinity of the area subject to the amendment, and on the community. And again, there's no additional, but these things weren't specifically addressed. So that's what the city council was including in their denial. And then including without limitations effect on the environment, transportation, public services and facilities and land use patterns. Those things have not changed. The area is fully built out. So the road has been the way it has been for quite some time. I mean, there's parking in that area can be an issue currently. If you had more business, it might, it could add to it. But basically, it's a status quo in terms of development impacts. And then another part to this conversation is the comprehensive plan does not require that the city council do one thing or another. We do state in our code that we will follow the plan. It's part of what we're supposed to do, but it's not something that has regulatory impact that says you shall do this. So that's part of this context. So in one way, I think part of this issue is when you're talking about public interest, if the public expresses an interest, and in the comprehensive planning process, there was a lot of public comment. The Planning Commission at the time voted for the comprehensive plan. The City Council voted for the plan, and the Kenai Peninsula Borough voted for the plan. So in our strategic documents, we have said that this is what we would do, and that was the public interest at the time. I think one of the themes at the time of the Seldovia City Council meeting recently, I think the essence of their decision was that they felt that they should keep commercial classification, or the commercial business district classification for these properties because it's an asset in the community. So that's kind of the arc of what, and if anybody else has any, feedback, I think that's what we're talking about. And we can provide that to the city council. So, it's, you know, it's, I think in your, decisions to make, whether, you know, do we stop and, deny the, let this end and let the appeal process go through, or do we provide the additional time for the discussion and making sure that we've provided as much of the information in terms of public interest and what that means to us as a community, and provide that to the city council. And then we are also, if we continue this, we also want to ask the city council for some information back on their decision process.
One thing, Madam Chair, if that is the decision of the commission to go through this process and send information back to the council, you don't have to complete that process tonight. We can bring back more information or have that discussion at the next meeting. It's just a matter of whether or not you want to go through that process, or if you want to close it. If you feel like there's a path forward and that you want to take that on, or if you are wanting to stick with the denial. And then we can move either way. What I'm trying to say is you don't have to have all the answers tonight. It's just that's the initial decision.
The council voted it down, right? And did it give reasons or anything?
They had discussion before they made a motion, but no, they did not attach reasons to the denial, other than what the discussion.
So is there
Took
anything
place.
we can do that?
The discussion focused on, as Chair Sweet said, about the economic impact of having those lots be commercial, as well as that it wasn't proven or shown that it was in the best interest of the public from the Planning Commission. And what was the third? There's something else we talked about. What do I say here? Oh, and that and it was mentioned that perhaps that it was erroneously put into the 2014 plan, or that it wasn't fully vetted and thought out compared to what previous plans and urban renewal had documented. So all previous plans before that, and even on the preferred plan page below that, where it shows preferred use, that it has the old or the current zoning. So that was part of the discussion as well on the council side.
Yeah, I just drove down it, it don't feel like a commercial area, it feels like a residential area. When you get to the end of it, you gotta figure out how to back up and turn around and come out of there. Seems to me if they're paying extra for their water and sewer, I mean, it just seems like they're already being penalized, I mean. Just, I don't know, it just, it just don't seem quite, I think they ought to have it. I think they ought to be able to do it either way, residential, commercial, whatever. But that's just what I thought.
Does anybody else have any feedback?
I would like to say, I think that I would vote for taking more time to figure this out instead of just denying it. So that would be my vote, is to take a little more time and figure out what exactly does the council want from us and from the community, and can we provide that? Because I mean, I agree also, I think that citizens and landowners here in Seldovia should be able to have feedback and should be able to request if they believe that they were zoned improperly, or if that no longer applies back when the zoning was happening. And I think we heard a lot of really good points on why those lots should be rezoned. And so I don't think we should just let it go, is my opinion.
So, and anybody else have any comments? So, yes, with the feedback that we, oh, sorry, I beg your pardon. Is there any public comment on this?
I'm not seeing any, Madam Chair.
So, given that, what I will do is propose a motion that would postpone the decision-making till the next meeting and have a continued conversation next meeting. So, I'll just read this out. So I would propose to postpone taking action on SPC resolution 25-01, denying the application to rezone waterfront sub number number 1, lots 2-4, block 13 from commercial business district to waterfront commercial district in order to allow the Seldovia Planning Commission and applicants time to address Seldovia Municipal Code 1897.010 B, item 7, and request the Seldovia City Council reconsider ordinance 25-02 with the item addressed and request feedback for the Seldovia City Council regarding their decision as finding of facts. So, if I can have a motion, to, a motion for, how do we do this without making people read the whole thing? Do I?
I could so move it. If that's
Okay,
what you're saying.
so if I can ask for a motion on this, I'm forgetting if it's an amendment or if we could have a motion on the postponement.
I'll make a motion to postpone it.
Second.
Thank you. And then if the clerk would call the roll.
I could just clarify, Madam Chair, are we postponing it to the next meeting or postponing it indefinitely?
Until there's more information.
Commissioner Forsberg,
Yes.
Commissioner Blanchard,
Yes.
Commissioner Kroll,
Yes.
and Commissioner Sweet.
Yes.
We have 4 in the affirmative, Madam Chair.
So the motion carries.
passes, Yeah.
Okay. So thank you. And then we will continue with our agenda. And the next item is the commercial business district review and action on recommendations. And so, did you want to give an overview for the
Sure. So through the chair, this has been an ongoing topic and just a little bit of gathering of what we've gone through so far. So Chair Sweet put together a list of worksheets for the recommendations that came out of the Commercial Business District Subcommittee. And so the things that we have addressed so far are the evaluation of the district name and changing that to the central business district. Removing the land use headers and alphabetizing and doing some other things to make the land use table more effective. As well as compiling some definitions for bed and breakfast and occupancy. And I think tonight's discussion, at the last meeting, we discussed or started the discussion on business definitions and adding a definition of business and in business to the code for to the definitions and to the requirements for the commercial business district. And so I just kind of wanted to bring back that topic for discussion to kind of flesh out what kind of definitions of occupancy and stuff we wanted to have in the draft ordinance that I'm working on. And so that was one topic. And then to try to more clearly define the short-term accommodation definition that was brought forward by council. You want to- So most of this information is in the laid down. And so the first worksheet, which is on number 5 of lay down, we'll go over the short-term accommodations, but Madam Chair, I don't know which one you'd like to start with.
That sounds like a good idea. It's fair. I think it's more straightforward.
Okay. So if you look at page 5, one of the suggestions that came out of the commercial business district subcommittee, and I did put the final report in the laydown as well, just to kind of ground everybody back in the document that we started with for this, is to combine cabin rentals, hostels, and lodge into short-term accommodations. And so the idea was to keep hotel and motel separate because they would have the 5 or more rooms and must be subject to different building codes and requirements. But to create a definition for short-term accommodations that included these 3 that were already in code, in addition to other things that might fit into that definition. So I kind of wanted to bring that back to the commission to kind of more flesh out what that definition would be. And I think the nuance of what we're coming into is that the short-term accommodation is a use, and the structure to how to more clearly define that, what structure that's applying to in that. So there is, did you put those definitions on this worksheet? I don't think they are. So for the recommendations, there were 2 different examples for short-term accommodation definitions, and they're not included on that worksheet. So I'll just read out the first one. Is short-term accommodation means a dwelling unit that is subject to a rental agreement, whether implicit, explicit, or written between the owner or tenant of the dwelling and a transient guest or guests to provide compensation, temporary accommodations not to exceed 30 days. So that was one example. And then the next one given was short-term accommodation is a residence that is generally rented for less than 30 consecutive calendar days. Typically, short-term rentals are booked for a few days or a few weeks. The rental comes fully furnished and tenants don't pay for expenses like utilities. So those were the 2 that were provided as an examples from, I believe both of those came from the committee. One is from Ecola Collier, and there are other definitions that you can find online, but I guess the idea is, do we tie that to a dwelling unit, which is in our code, or to a residence, and how to best make that definition fit to what the commission wants to see that mean on the land use table.
And just for the good of the order on the Seldovia Planning Commission on the report that the city clerk provided. If you go to page 15 to page 16 of the package, that those two
Oh, they aren't.
Statements that we made are there.
Oh, they are. Okay, good.
Just, we have several or so.
Yeah, so that would be on page 16 of the lay down at the very top. And so I guess I just opened it up for more direction or discussion on how we want to approach that topic of making it, we want to keep it a commercial area. So how do we make that definition fit for short-term accommodation being a use? And so what is it a use of? Do we want it to say dwelling unit, which is in our code, or residence, or occupied structure? Open to ideas. I don't know if city manager Gagel has, she looks like she's searching it.
So this is Randy, or the suite. I just wanted to, so what our goal with this, I mean, in the work of the subcommittee was trying to help clarify things and make things easy to understand for the people that use the code. So that's one of our goals. And then I guess one of the things that so we have short-term use in different categories of buildings. And so hotels and motels are a different category. They may have the same short-term accommodations may apply to it, but it would have to be in a different part of the code. And so what we're after is those things that meet this particular definition, and specifically to what the subcommittee referred to group these three categories into the short-term accommodations. And we need to be careful with our language, whether we say residence or dwelling unit, because there's other things that we define in our code. So that may be a part of the language that we may need to just hold on to in order to be able to cover what we actually refer to. And I guess it's the city clerk or the city manager, if you have like a recommendation out of the things that we have available to us, that we've had feedback from our subcommittee. Is there something that's going to meet our need and be consistent with our code?
So, and just, I've been searching for a little while on this, and we've been talking a lot about it, and trying how to simplify, but still carry all of these different uses. And one thought, after just doing another search and trying to think through what is being described, is perhaps we can simplify the definition and the use by broadening a little bit, which I know sounds crazy. But by having a definition, you can define short-term accommodations. Say, for instance, short-term accommodations refer to temporary rental arrangements for sleep accommodations of periods of less than 30 consecutive days. I'm not saying those are the exact words, we've workshopped them, and then say this includes, and have your hostels, your lodges, and your dwelling units under it. Because what you're really saying is it's a short-term rental for somebody to sleep for sleeping accommodations of less than 30 consecutive days. And there are multiple styles that can fall under. It can be a hostel, which is a shared dormitory style lodging. And we define the hostels under it. It could be a lodge, which is a short-term lodging where guests rent individual rooms, often with a facility that provides common areas or additional services, which is similar to the definition we have. or we would need to update our definition. That's where we were going when this started. Or dwelling units, so rentals of rooms or entire structures for temporary stays, such as single family homes, apartments, and other residential units. So maybe instead of trying to have the initial definition cover all things, maybe it's an initial definition of what a short-term accommodation is, right? It's a sleeping accommodation for less than 30 days. And then underneath, you provide those examples of those different types of short-term accommodations. Just throwing that out there, not to confuse things.
And I would encourage everyone to, anyone who has any ideas or thoughts to speak up. And I would also ask the public, I guess, suspend the rules and that to allow for the public to participate in this conversation.
Thank you.
No, it's for the people online.
This is Ecola Collier. I think one of the issues that we found trying to include all of those was what their use is in other zones besides commercial business. So if you look at your current zoning districts, cabins and hostels are conditional in some of the other zones where a lodge is permitted. So that would be something to consider if you're going to allow short-term accommodations in those forms in all of those districts, then those other zones will have to change.
I had a question. Are short-term rentals allowed in strictly residential zones?
If I may, I don't believe currently you have that as a line item in your land use table. So it's,
We do have dwelling unit nightly rental in our land use table. So I believe they are allowed in most zones.
they're
but-
conditional in commercial and industrial, permitted in the WCR, secondary in CB, permitted in CR, permitted in residential RG.
That's residential general. Yeah, so I think with the exception of that commercial and industrial district, they're allowed.
Yeah, so it looks like the only thing that would change would be it would allow hostels and cabin rentals as a permitted use in commercial business instead of a conditional use. And so that would be a consideration. Which I don't know that that's too much of a stretch because cabin, technically a cabin, well, I guess it would fit the need of the commercial business district then. Well, it's something to think about.
That short-term 30-day thing is a deal like that. Say you're a construction worker and you're here all summer, you're renting a cabin, so you'd have to check out for a day and then come back. How does that work?
So they would be a long-term residential rental then. That's how the tax structure is set up through the Kenai Peninsula Borough. If it's under 30 days, then they're short-term rentals and you charge nightly. If it's over 30 days, then it's a monthly rental. And buildings can be mixed use. I know we always circle back into this, but we're not saying that they are one thing or another. They can be short-term and long-term in the same building, depending on how their building is set up. It's just a matter of defining what the short-term is. And so maybe if it doesn't meet the needs of hostels and lodges and you want those still to be conditional use in the business district, then maybe those are pulled out and we still keep all of those separate definitions. You have a short-term accommodation definition that will take the place of dwelling unit nightly rental. You have a lodge definition, a hostel definition, and just keep them separate. If it doesn't make sense to combine. I know that was the goal of the subcommittee, was to simplify, but maybe in this case, it doesn't make sense.
This is E. Cola again. Another thing that we had discussed on the subcommittee was removing them because they would be considered being in business and it wouldn't have to have its own subcategory.
But again, then you're saying that it doesn't matter what type of business, they could be in any district.
Correct. Well, correct. I think we had made them into.
I think that was personal and consumer, not for nightly lodging. But I could be wrong.
Yeah, if you look in the other ones, you'll see it was to combine retail business, consumer business services, commercial recreation, personal services, combine that all into a business category of what that means.
So if we kept, I'm trying to read, it was like a year ago. If we kept the nightly rental or short-term accommodation, we might have landed on. If we kept it as short-term accommodation, and then you could consider whether it's permitted, secondary, or conditional in the other districts. The only difference would be the cabins and hostel, whether they're permitted in the commercial business, and then whether you would be doing conditional lodges for the other districts or permitted for all three in other districts.
Right now, lodges is permitted except for residential. And that's conditional.
So I guess what is the best? What is the highest and best use to do? I mean, what is the thing that would be most helpful then so we have a category of nightly rentals right now, is that correct? And that is basically being revised as a short-term accommodations. So that's one thing that couldn't be done without any prejudice as far as or disparate impact in terms of different districts. So we can do that in terms of just the verb. And then on the lodges, cabin rentals, and
Hostels, lodges, and cabin rentals.
lodges and cabin rentals. Everything is okay except for
Hostels and cabin rentals are a commercial or a conditional use and commercial business district. And lodges are a conditional use in residential. So do they need to stay separate so that they can have those categories? And also I would like to point out that nightly rentals are currently a secondary use in commercial business districts. So that's part of the discussion, is if they should be permitted in commercial business. There's a loophole there right now through lodges, and that's so that lodges can run as a primary use in commercial business. So you could be addressing that by saying that short-term accommodations are allowed, and then or as a permitted use, and then
And that would have no impact on commercial businesses. Right?
well, I mean, because they can use it as a lodge, is the same
Yeah,
thing.
Right.
Yeah.
So it's,
It would clarify which
Yeah,
direction
yeah.
the code says to go
I
on.
guess it's like I guess if we can identify the outliers that need to remain distinctive, then maybe there's a note or something that we could identify to identify that exception. But then we could, if we could, and this is just this is just an idea. So would it work to do something like that where you would pull everything in, and then if there was something specific that was excluded, to just identify it, just have a note underneath on the land use table and just say these things are excluded.
That could work. One other item I'd like to mention is when we first just started talking about these changes, almost probably 2 years ago now. One of the things suggested was actually to strike out cabin rentals in its whole, because it's the renting of one or more individual detached dwelling units or buildings to provide overnight sleeping accommodations for a period of less than 30 consecutive days. And that we just considered a dwelling unit doesn't need to be defined further as a cabin if you're renting out a dwelling unit, which is what it defines it as, a detached dwelling unit. And that was part of the thought processes. It doesn't really matter if it's attached or detached, it's a dwelling unit. So that could be one thing that could just be taken out. And currently cabin rentals are a conditional use in commercial business, industrial and commercial, but it would just fall under short-term accommodations. So whatever that designation would be, cabin rentals. I don't know that that needs to be separate unless there's a reason why somebody thinks that detached dwelling units need to be separated out from short-term accommodations. No.
I think the only thing I would see in that would be that there's a requirement for open space in some districts based on how many dwelling units there are. And if cabin rentals had a separate requirement for that, you could fit more onto one property. But that's the only.
But we don't have that.
Yeah, I don't believe we have that.
So is striking cabin rentals and using dwelling units, does that solve the problem, or?
Well, we already use dwelling units, so just using the short-term accommodation, and that includes the rental of a dwelling unit in the definition, however that is defined, would cover cabin rentals.
And so changing that line on the land use table to short-term accommodations and removing cabin rentals.
Yes, and then you would just have to address hostels and lodges.
Do you know if hostels also require special permitting like hotels and motels?
Trying to remember. I think again, it depends on the size of them. But there is something in the building code about it. But yeah, I would have to go back and check on that.
I think the hope of the subcommittee was to try to remove all three of those and just combine them under one definition because they're providing that same service.
So yes, hostels may require separate permitting. And especially in residential areas, it looks like. So perhaps those have to stay out. And then lodges, let's look at the definition of a lodge. Which is in our code right now, it's very similar to a short-term accommodation. So if we just removed it and it became short-term accommodation, the question would be then, is there a need to have an additional definition for what a lodge really entails, which is rental by the room with like a typical common area. So like a bed and breakfast, but not staying in the bed and breakfast, not, it's not a residence, you're staying in there. So is there that would be a consideration, is hostels stay the same, cabin rentals is removed, and then looking at lodging, we define lodging as a building or group of buildings containing 5 or fewer guest rooms used for the purpose of offering public lodging on a day-to-day basis with or without meals. It's pretty vague. I think that's a short-term accommodation right there, if I've ever heard one. But if you do look up what a lodge is, universally, it's more known as, ooh, getting some really weird things.
That's like. On that page 5, that the rules there are, the difference between a hotel and a lodge is a hotel is 5 or more,
Mm-hmm.
and a lodge is 5 or less. What I see here.
Yeah. So, in more general terms, short-term lodging would be where guests rent individual rooms. So like a hotel, but on a smaller scale, often with a facility that provides common areas or additional services. So I don't know if maybe that's not important, and maybe lodging is separate or is removed as well.
I think another one of our goals on the subcommittee was we didn't want to make it more difficult for our business owners in the district and trying to run a business and possibly having to renovate your space to fit the definition or not. But if we had that one category of we're providing short-term accommodations, we're in business, that we could take some of those other items out of the land use table. They're providing the same service. We're trying to simplify.
So is there any downside to just to remove? So basically, if you removed, so is maybe kind of what I'm hearing you say, but make sure I'm just trying to make sure I am hearing what you actually intended was, so is taking the lodge definition away and then just using short-term accommodations, is that a helpful thing to do?
I think it is helpful for the city, for the land use table, and for individuals trying to read the land use table to
And
less is
it was,
more in
yeah,
that
yeah,
respect.
and
but
I'm
as an
I'm not
individual
asking for a big,
business owner,
yeah,
I think as long as short-term accommodations is still permitted in the business district, and the couple business owners that you have in this district that have that type of business is still permitted, then we're okay with you removing lodges. But currently I'm operating a lodge and that's
Mhm.
how I'm able to be in business.
right. So we don't want to disrupt we don't want to disrupt something that's working, but we want to help make things simple. And understanding that lumping and splitting are, I mean, it's like there's ups and downs to doing that, but if this would help make things simpler, is there a downside to that, or is this just something that could be like, okay, this is a place where we can simplify?
Well, if you're looking at me, I think, as Ms. Collier pointed out, the lodge definition does allow short-term accommodations in the commercial business. So if you were to remove it, you would need to be able to make sure that short-term accommodations are allowed through that avenue. And then the other thing that it does is separate from the others is it's a conditional use in residential. And I'm trying to think through like what that, because in my mind, a lodge is similar to a bed and breakfast or small cabin rentals with a common place where people can come to eat and be together. And I don't know why you wouldn't allow that in residential. We already allow
Short-term accommodation.
short-term accommodations. Yes, I'm not sure why
think
there would
it's
be a
that.
difference.
There's a carryover probably from not wanting to have transient lodging within residential areas, having it stay more residential. It's in a lot of codes. Research, but I think it might be outdated in this.
Yeah, because we do allow short-term accommodations
Yeah.
in residential.
So if we're doing this updating, this would be consistent with current practices.
I mean, yes and no. Short-term accommodations is a huge topic across the country, and whether municipalities are allowing it or not, and what zones are not.
Right.
So it just depends on what your
It
stance
is a
is.
topic at the Alaska Municipal League Conference in December.
Yes.
I mean, I guess the and I would imagine the issue has to do with VBROs or Airbnbs overtaking neighborhoods to the point where it intrudes into accommodation for residents of the community. So that I think that's the thing that.
Yeah, worker housing is
Right.
the other side of the coin.
So, so we've had a conversation about short-term accommodations, and I guess, it's the city clerk can you, based on what you've heard, can you see a solution that would simplify and be helpful to both the community and the business community?
So I think if we leave the dwelling units in the land use table how they are now, and we put in the definition that city manager Gagel put in that was kind of broad, the short-term accommodation refer to temporary rental arrangements for sleeping for periods of less than 30 days. Do you think that would be too broad? And then just remove the cabin rentals and lodges and put that short-term accommodations on the land use table as well?
Well,
Is that permitted in the commercial business district?
I mean, we could workshop it to be something like, well, what are those other definitions that were provided?
Yeah.
That it's a dwelling unit or a part of a dwelling unit, a room in a dwelling unit.
The consensus of what I'm hearing is that we're going to remove cabin rentals and lodges from the definition's entirety and incorporate the cabin rentals are kind of duplicative at this point because we have short-term accommodations for dwelling units. And then lodges would be removed as well, and short-term accommodations would be made permitted in those areas that lodges are now. But, and then Heidi and I will work on a more cohesive definition
And
for that, unless the commission has any more input on that.
any other, any other input? And then I guess I would just, one piece of information I would just ask as you guys are updating this is we just want to make sure that we're not doing anything to jeopardize anybody's current category. We want to make sure that there's business continuity in what people are doing and that we're not doing anything that would jeopardize that.
Fair point. I think this opens it up a lot, not a lot, but this will open it up more in residential and commercial business and not have any of those hoops to jump through of what you're defined as, and just have the allowance there.
So are we, any other comments or we can go ahead and close this topic out for today? I just want to check in with everybody because we've got, we have one other topic on this, on the commercial business district. Do you guys want to continue and tackle the business definitions tonight? Because we have 3 other topics that I think will take some time, so it's up to the will of the body.
And I think if I could just give an overview of where we were from the last meeting on that,
On the business.
on the business
Okay.
definitions. So on page number 11, there's an example definition from Houston, Alaska's municipal code, which we had discussed at the last meeting. And I'll just read it out for everybody. Business means an activity involving wholesale or retail sales or the rental of any article, substance, or commodity, including but not limited to building materials, vehicles, and the provision of all commercial services, including financial institutions and personal services. So it was a category that kind of combined a lot of what we had in our business district definitions. But then in Title V of our code, we do have our chapter on business license, and that starts at the bottom of that same page 11. And if you flip over to page 12, there is a definition in there for our business license section for business, which includes all activities or acts, whether personal, professional, or corporate, engaged in or caused to be engaged in with the object of financial or pecuniary gain, profit, or benefit, either direct or indirect. So we do already have a definition for what we consider people who need a business license, and in addition, engage in business. So that I just kind of wanted to point that out for consideration, whether or not we might want to refer back to that definition instead, if that makes more sense than the one that we have in there. We could refer back to that definition. And then on page 13, we talked about having criteria for what it means to be in business and operating a business. And so highlighted there, you'll see what our requirements are for having business license. And they have proof that they have received or applied for a valid state business license, proof that they have a sales tax registration, proof satisfactory that they have all applicable operational and federal licenses. So this kind of lines out what we already have in code. And we had talked about adding in some sort of safeguards to make clear what that defines. But I feel like we can just refer to this section of code for that section if the commission is okay with that. And then we can make sure that that's, I don't know if we want to make sure that that's in the commercial business district category so that that's clearly defined as well. If it just refers back to this code so that people know what the requirements are to have a business in that district. So those were the 2 things I kind of wanted to get some guidance on with the business discussion, as well as there are also other business definitions that have been provided in there. So, there's any comments on that, we can think about it. The plan was to kind of try to get these two pieces put together so we could come back with kind of a more complete draft ordinance at the next meeting. So we can stick with that business definition from Easton that we took, or we can refer back to this one, or this worksheet has some other definitions on there, might fit as well.
So this is Randy. I'm wondering if it is more, since we have a section on the business, all these definitions, we have them in our code in a different section. So it would seem like it would be most efficient to just refer to the requirements in the commercial business district, because the commercial business district isn't the only place where people have business licenses, and requirements. So we should probably refer to it. And then I guess if there's, as you were looking at this, is there anything in the things that we have talked about as far as the business requirements? Is there anything that we've talked about that may be of use to incorporate in Title V, or is it just the things that are stated in Title V? They may not be exactly the same way as the recommended language, but it basically meets the intent of what the discussion in the subcommittee was. So just kind of checking in on that.
I think it meets the intent of what we already kind of require, and spelling that out a little bit more.
Okay.
It's just whether or not we wanted to add any additional things about what being active or engaged in that business means. And that would be one of the other discussions.
In that definition, the new purpose for the commercial business, does it talk about being engaged in business? Because that might be a way to refer back, is to make sure that that the definition says that that the purpose of the commercial business district is to be engaged in business, and then we could refer back as a thought.
Mhm. It would make sense, and it would help direct if a person is looking for guidance, then they would be directed to that. And then possibly in Title V, there could be a statement that says to check for your particular district to see if there were to determine what any specific requirements you had.
That's beautiful.
That's great. I, as a business owner, didn't know about Title V and that I should look there for this information.
One of the things, as we were preparing for the meeting, one of the things that we talked about was the possibility of creating a business owner checklist, so that when people were doing business, when they're trying to do this, that there was something, just like we have a building permit checklist, and so that might be a way to, again, help support the business community, so it's clear what needs to be done. So it's in the sort of thinking stage and kind of figuring out what could we do that could actually help. So all of this, all this discussion is just thinking about how to really help and to streamline things. And we want to have requirements. And I think the subcommittee, was definitely, yes, we need requirements, but we want to make sure that they make sense and that they're not conflicting with each other, and that they're fairly easy to use. So it's something that's in the background, as as things are happening.
Well, I think a checklist would be a great idea for businesses because it's overwhelming to have a list of all the requirements, and having guidance would really help probably promote new businesses.
Thank you, Commissioner Blanchard. Does anyone else have any questions or feedback? And I guess from the staff perspective, the feedback that you've gotten, that gives you a good way forward to update things and then if we can bring those things back next week, or sorry, not next week, but we'll be meeting on the 4th of December. So if we can come back to that, so that and then we can review it and hopefully approve it and move it into the updating the draft code.
Yeah, I guess my only confusion is for the definition of business. Do we want to stick with the one that we
Mhm.
had got
Sorry.
from Houston, or do we want to refer back to what's in Title V? And
Can I jump in here?
Absolutely.
I'm actually, this is ringing in the back of my head too, because I like how Akola mentioned that short-term accommodations are business. And if you look at the definition in Title V, it's pretty broad to encompass all business, which it should. But I think what the subcommittee was trying to get to was a more generalized definition of being in business for basic retail, professional, and consumer activities that are outside of what's already defined. There are things that need to be defined separately. So perhaps instead of it being just a business definition, maybe it's a business, like a business general, or I don't know. And then it has a generalized definition, and then you can provide those examples of what they are underneath. But something that shows that when we are talking about business, I'm just thinking on administrative standpoint, because it would be a nightmare if we call all business in this title. So when we're thinking about business in this title, we're talking about general businesses in these categories. Does that make sense?
which title are you talking about? Title V or Title 18?
Title 18.
Okay.
Title 5 business is business, and that's probably the way it should be. But I think and correct me if I'm wrong, Akola, but I'm from what I heard in those discussions is having a generalized business category for the things that don't need a separate definition. And so maybe it's not just business, maybe it's like a business general, and we kind of lay out what that looks like. That way it doesn't confuse things with Title V, but it still meets the need. Does that make sense?
So this is Randy. So as you're talking through that, would you see a definition in Title 18, or
Yeah.
how would you translate that into?
Right. So right now in Title 18, we have business consumer, business personal. We've talked about how recreation really fits under that need. And actually this code from Houston really does kind of cover it. Wholesale, retail sales, rental of articles, substance or commodity, including but not limited to building materials, vehicles, provision of all commercial services. So it could even be this definition, but just like a business general, or it doesn't, I don't know if we need to call it out or not, but if we want to differentiate from Title V, maybe call that out. And then you could even just show underneath, like including, but not limited to, and then keep those definitions. So they're not on the land use table, but they're still in there to kind of show what that business consumer is, what business personal is, what recreation, whatever the ones that go underneath it are. So that way, when somebody goes to the definitions, looks up what is a business general? Oh, okay, it's these items. And then on the land use table, it's just business general.
And that's helpful to you as a business owner to,
I think it would have been as someone coming in and purchasing a property in the business district, seeing what is permitted, not permitted, and like not having to go through and like, well, does it fit under this category? And no, I'm okay with this one, but not with this, where like Heidi was saying, business consumer services, business personal services, retail business, wholesale business, they're all permitted in the same districts. They all have similar purposes. And as a business owner, it's helpful to have a, I don't know. I think it would have been helpful to have a single category of like, okay, well, these are all of the things that are
Mhm.
permitted in these districts. Instead of trying to navigate the land use table. Although I really enjoy having a land use table. I think it's great. Just trying to simplify that. So I don't know, people going into business can do that easier.
okay. And so with that, does that give the staff, is there anything else that you can think of? But, or are we at a place where you can take this information and
Yeah, so do we want to keep short-term accommodations as a separate line on the land use table? That's, I think,
Yeah, I think it was, they were going to put that in place instead of the dwelling unit
Okay.
nightly rental and then open it up in commercial business district.
okay,
And then taking out lodging and cabins, but keeping hostels. Right? Is that the consensus? Am I tracking? That's what my notes say.
if anyone has any objections, please speak up. Otherwise, we'll consider it, that Heidi's moving forward with.
okay. Yeah.
Well, thank you. I thank you, everybody, for, I know this is like, sometimes it feels like slogging through mud, but hopefully what we're doing is going to have a positive impact down the road for people who can actually create businesses and have something that's supportive of their efforts. So thank you. And then we'll go on to item 3, building permits, topographical impacts.
Maybe that one.
Yeah, so this one keeps circulating around, and the staff identified that it would be helpful that as part of the building permit process, that when people are removing buildings, that there was a check-in with the city, whether it be through the permit process or which is how it's shown now as an example. That doesn't mean that has to be in order to make sure that utilities aren't just abandoned, that they're capped and taken care of. And that the property isn't a public health concern. So, but really mainly utilities is kind of a big issue. So we've looked at a lot of different communities. I've gone around and around on how to do this. We've had these discussions with the commission. We've had these discussions with the council. The council sent it back to the commission in that better defining topographical impacts and that process, as well as what the enforcement or follow through is from the city. So it's kind of a two-prong issue: is what's the process, and then how do we follow through? And so if you look at page 54, I provided a memo with some background just to bring us back into this topic, because it's been a while since we've met. That on September 7th, a public hearing was held by the city council per the recommendations of the Seldovia Planning Commission. So you guys had sent recommendations to them that added in, and you'll see that ordinance, I believe it's later on in the packet here. that added in yep, starts on page 93. So just simply under building permits in Title 17, it added in section E, adverse topographical impacts. If the project upon review by city staff or a member of the Seldovia Planning Commission is determined to have the potential to have an adverse impact on neighboring properties, such as change in water flow, topographical shift, or slope instability, the city clerk shall schedule a public hearing of the application as specified in SMC 1896. And so council referred that back to the planning commission and said, you guys need to have a better definition of what an adverse topographical impact is and clarify code enforcement. And, you know, we don't like to completely reinvent the wheel here in what we're doing because this isn't new. A lot of communities deal with coastal erosion, slope erosion, building on banks. Right now, stormwater management is huge, and it's rearing its head in this community itself. So it's even our neighbors in Homer address it, and I did provide those as an example because it seems like they did a fairly good job. On pages, let's see, 65, slopes and coastal development. 68 is miscellaneous site development standards, just as an idea of information out there. And if you look at, I was looking at one more, stormwater plan on 76. So that might be something to consider putting in code as just a more of a generalized standards for stormwater and standards for slopes that that provide assistance to somebody when they're building that like for instance under standards for stormwater sites shall minimize the channelization of stormwater, surface water runoff that results from all natural forms of precipitation and maximizes pervious areas for stormwater absorption. This is a big topic, so I'm not expecting you guys to be able to process and work through it all at once. But one idea was that included in the building permit, it'd be broadened and include those items like removal of a building. Let's see here. Demolishing a building and excavation and fill. Moving, demolishing, and excavation and fill, as well as any other additional site developments be included on the building permit. So there's a process that somebody is impacting the land or their property that will have an impact on the neighboring properties, right? That's the whole crux of having a building permit. The whole reason is because we're watching setbacks, we're watching height, we're watching parking, and we're watching lot coverage. And I'll go through this consideration list, and these are things we can work through in the future. But if that's something that if that's something that the commission wants, and I won't jump ahead. So for consideration, we could look at updating Title 17, and I did put us like a draft start in here, utilizing some of Homer's language on the next page. It's draft ordinance 25XX, and it would cross out we have 4 defining paragraphs for building permit. And instead we would put in 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 more sections, or we don't have to do that much. But that just include that information that if a building is being moved, if it's being demolished, if there's site excavation or fill, and then of course our generalized ones of if you're changing the height or the footprint or any of the existing structure, the outside of the existing structure, that you would need a permit or for new construction, so on and so forth. So that's a consideration, is to update that code to include those items, moving, demolishing, and excavation of fill. The second consideration is incorporating the code for other site development such as slopes and coastal development and stormwater management along with site development standards. Third, update the Seldovia building permit to include moving structures, removing structures, and that's all. That's number one. Sorry, guys, I repeated myself there. Four, include updated definitions for setbacks, including requirement of overhangs to not be within the setback or not be further than 2 feet in the setback in an ordinance update. Through research, the standard seems to be that overhangs are allowed up to 2 feet in the setback, which is measured from the foundation. This might be beneficial to include with the updated definitions recommended from the commercial business subcommittee recommendations. I'm throwing that out there. If you're already updating definitions, you may want to throw that in there. Include a requirement in the building permit process that if setbacks are questionable and not clarified well enough on the site plan, that a setback check may be required at the cost of the applicant. Setback checks can be performed by a surveyor for less than the cost of a full survey. We have a lot of issues with setbacks in this community and people building into the setbacks or not building, building either not where they said or where they think, and it's crossing property boundary lines, or it's too close to the road, or it's an issue. So that's a way that if that's identified, that can be an issue. We can ask for somebody to come over and check those setbacks. And then include in the building permit process a staff inspection checklist that has beginning, middle, and closeout construction items. For instance, staff inspect the site before approving a building permit to verify those setbacks, lot coverage, and parking. If necessary, staff complete a project check midway through the construction. At project closeout, staff confirm building height, setbacks, lot coverage, and parking. And an example checklist can be provided at an upcoming meeting. I didn't have the bandwidth for this meeting to provide that. But that's, I think, addressing the council's enforcement process is how are we verifying and going through and saying that, yes, we're doing what we say we're doing. We're approving what we said we would approve. Construction is happening as people say it's going to happen. And then last, consider changing the requirement for a building permit to a requirement for a zoning permit. So just changing that word from building to zoning. I don't know about you guys, but that's one thing that's always really bugged me is we are actually not checking what people are building. We don't have a fire marshal's office or we're a fire inspection office. We are not so concerned on what's happening on the interior or structurally, as long as people are following building codes, which we refer back to. But when we look at a building permit, there really is those 4 things. We're looking at height, setback, well, first initial zone. So five things: zone, height, setback, parking, and lot coverage. And that to me seems more applicable to zoning, but maybe that's just something that my little hill that I'll stay on.
That is what Homer moved to a few years back, but they also don't incorporate building codes in the city of Homer either, which I found kind of interesting.
But they have a zoning permit.
They do it. They changed to a zoning permit some years ago.
It seems more applicable because that's what you're looking at is the zone, and that making sure that they're not impeding on their neighbor. So those are some things for consideration. If you want to address any of these, we can bring back examples in the future and start working through this process, open from feedback from the commission.
So does anyone want to provide any feedback or have any questions? So I guess on a going forward basis, the things that you're listing as considerations, are those in the proposed draft that you have provided, or they're sort of underway? They're
They're underway. I wanted to provide a draft to show you what
Right,
that would
right.
initially mean. So doing that, the building code piece, and I didn't finish it out.
Okay.
But we could present that, we can take it a chunk at a time and like present what it would look like to amend the building permit, and then you guys could provide feedback on what is needed or not needed in there. And then we could just keep moving through it by consideration, so we don't have to do it all at once. So if we amend the building permit, and then we can look at different site developments and incorporating those into either Title 17 or Title 18. And then we can work on that definition for setbacks. That should probably just happen as soon as it can. So we can incorporate that into the subcommittee recommendations, or this one, whichever one comes first. And then for that building permit process, that's just a matter of updating the building permit to include the setback check could be a requirement, and then doing the closeout list. So there's like 5 steps there. And then the consideration of if you guys want it to be a zoning permit or a building permit.
So I guess just as something simple is does the does any of the commission do any of the commissioners have any feedback on the name, or are you okay with changing the name from building permit to zoning permit? Is that
I think that works fine. This is Stephanie.
okay? So at least we can so I guess just from a guidance perspective, it seems like that is something you can use in your draft documents.
Okay.
And then what I also heard you say was that you would prioritize kind of the important issues, and setbacks was one of them. And I would imagine that I don't know that we're going to finish all of the recommendations for the subcommittee by next week. Next meeting of the commission. So depending on your timeline for how urgent it is to get the setbacks taken care of, you may want to provide that as a proposal on the 4th of December so that it could be done expeditiously.
We could incorporate it into that ordinance that's presented on the 4th if it's being presented. The draft ordinance with the definition changes.
The draft ordinance with the definition
Talking about the
changes.
one for the commercial business district.
Okay,
that
so
correct?
that the plan is to have a draft ordinance with the definition changes for Title 18 on the 4th.
Yeah, the plan for the 4th is to have a working draft ordinance with all the changes we've discussed so far coming out of the commercial business
Okay.
district recommendations,
Okay.
including the guidance from tonight,
Okay.
and have
So
that prepared for it.
that
And
could,
then
that could be incorporated, and then we could vote on it. And
it's going to make it a really big ordinance, but
It's going to be anyways. That way we're not you're not voting on the ordinance with all these changes and then having a separate smaller change
Okay.
afterwards in
Okay.
for a definition.
okay,
It just buttons up those definitions in one.
And then Heidi, would we have to do that in each individual zoning district, or is there a way to do that for general?
I'm sorry, what are you asking?
The setback changes? They have to be by zoning, by district.
Let's look.
it's gonna be a bigger ordinance package.
And then just for clarification, are we talking about setbacks for excavation or setbacks from eaves or just setbacks in general?
So as it states in here, include updated definition for setbacks, including requirements of overhangs to not be within the setback or to not be further than 2 feet in the setback, and an ordinance update That's the standard. Typically is that the overhang can be allowed up to 2 feet in the setback. So that would be a determination from the commission tonight. And I think it really would just be updating that setback definition, because in the chapters themselves, they talk about the building setback from the boundary line. And we're just saying that building setback includes part of the eave, which some people already do. So it's clarifying yes or no, that the eave can be the eave is allowed 2 feet into the setback or not. Like, let's make a determination, because we do have builders, people that build in this community that go one way or the other, and we don't really have a
Standard.
standard.
And then the other question was about setback for excavation. I know that's been talked about. Do we want to incorporate that?
I think that'll be in the site development section. That's a bigger topic right there.
Okay, so at this point, you have feedback from the commission to go forward in this agenda item.
Okay. Do we want to do the 2 feet allowance, since that's already kind of the standard and something that we do have allowed?
Is there any objection to a 2-foot allowance of an eave going into a setback? There is no objection. So you want to proceed with that?
Okay.
And then the next agenda item for abatement ordinance examples for consideration.
Okay, so this is also something that's been on the back burner, and we were waiting to hopefully get through commercial business before we jumped on another potentially big topic. But as we're winding down and this is winding up, it seems like it's an applicable time to present. This is something that it was requested from legal quite a while ago, I think actually from the previous administrator, to look at how to remedy and implement abatement code within the city. And so let's go to it in the packet. We do have abandoned property under Title 8, under Chapter 8.06. And so from legal, we received back 3 examples of abatement code from different communities that are pretty useful or have worked well for those. They're pretty well done abatement codes. And then there was a start to how to amend that section 8.06 abandoned property to meet those needs. And so the question then from legal is, which direction do we want to go? How do we want to work on this? And if you start on page
95.
You'll see there's code from Homer, public nuisance abatement. And then there is code from Wasilla on page 104. And I liked Wasilla's layout. That's called public nuisance, and it seemed to flow really well and have be more in layman's terms, more understandable. But any of these codes would be applicable. And then on page 109 is Houston's. So if you guys want to take some time with this, if you haven't had a chance to review them, we can bring this topic back at the upcoming meeting. But the question really is would any of these meet our needs? And then, oh, there's an extra one. And then if you see on page 122, that was the first, and it doesn't really, I'm not really a big fan of it because it doesn't show what those changes are, but there are some changes in there. I guess I would have to do a red line, ask them for a red line to show what's changed from what their recommendations to the existing. So if you guys want to look at those ordinances and then provide some feedback on what works best, if we just want to update our current 806, or if we want to implement something that maybe is a little bit more understandable, maybe it's not an issue. Maybe understanding is not an issue, but it's a lot of language. And so even just like looking at Wasilla's public nuisance, if I'm not making sense of what we're talking about, what we're talking about is what are the remedies for a public nuisance, like a junkyard or property that's a public health hazard or a public safety issue. So, and there's a general theme in between all of these, and that's that you would issue an order for those individuals to clean up their area or put a fence on it, something to contain it. And then if they can't accommodate that, then the municipality would come in and do it at the cost to the property owner. And this has been a desire of the council for us to address for many years.
So your request is for the commissioners to review this prior to the next meeting and then provide any feedback at the next meeting. And then I think one of the things I heard you say is that you thought that the Wasilla example is helpful because it is written in layman's terms and it seems to meet the requirements that we would like to have.
That was my opinion. Of course, I would love to hear from you guys, but just in reading all three, it was like the Wasilla ones to me seemed easier to comprehend, but I would love that feedback from the commission.
Okay, so your request is noted and we will put that on our to-do list and then have further conversations on this on the 4th of December. And is there, sorry, do any of the commissioners have any feedback before we go to the next item? Okay, with that, we'll go ahead and continue to item 5, the capital improvement plan.
Thank you. I wish I would have had a moment to write a memo, but this came down to the very last minute to complete this huge document that I hope you have a copy of in front of you. And if not, we have a couple extra copies available. This is something that we have, the Seldovia City Council has been has incorporated over the last many years. This, I think, is the fourth update. And so it's a 6-year plan that they update it every year, which is great because really is a living document that shows the priorities of the council in terms of capital projects. Do you have a copy of this? Do you need a copy of it?
No.
All right. So with that in mind, I don't believe this has come to the planning commission before, and it would be great to have your guys' feedback. It's kind of already at the ending stages and going to council next week, but any feedback we receive, we make note of, and then we incorporate and continue to update the plan as we move forward, so that we can stay up to date and stays very pertinent. This plan has been used to apply for a plethora of grants. We've received some grants from it, and it also is a document that we use to communicate to our state and federal delegates. So they will ask, what are your priorities? And then we can pull out our one sheets that the council determines that they've designated as legislative priorities, and that's coming up at Monday's meeting, and then provide those to individuals, and it gives them a good idea of the project description and cost. Hopefully, not everything in here has a cost because some are more newer ideas than others, but that does address some things that the Planning Commission has talked about, and I think it would be great to have feedback from the Planning Commission if there are other projects you guys would like to see, as well as I love if we could do an exercise moving forward. I did it this week and it was pretty tedious, but it was a big eye opener on how our comprehensive plan actually works in action. So I took every single item and then referred back to the comprehensive plan to see how it aligned. And while they all align in various ways, there were a few things that I made note of in that exercise. For instance, that under transportation, we don't talk about or thoroughly address updating and maintaining our existing roads. Which I was like, oh, you would think that would be a transportation goal. And it didn't address stormwater, which is also a big part of transportation. And then under environmental, we didn't, the plan doesn't address climate change or climate action. So it's like, that's kind of an environmental piece. So I found this to be very helpful to see if it kind of called out where there may be some potential holes in the plan, but also to show that the things that we are working on do align with that comprehensive plan, which is useful. So that might be a great exercise to do together, if the commission is interested in the future as a way of really utilizing that comprehensive plan. With this land use, I normally have a list of how many number ones and twos and threes and fours, but like I said, this was down at the last hour. But there were a few new things that were incorporated into it. If you look at page 2, I want to start you here of the land use, or not land use, sorry, the CIP. This is a really helpful guide of the projects, the list of projects that are in there, and it's our table of contents. And so you can see they're split into sections. There's facility projects, rolling stock, surface transportation, quality of life, and then our special revenue funds, which are the small boat harbor, municipal dock, boat haul out storage, water capital projects, and wastewater capital projects. And then last but not least is collaborative capital projects and partnerships. And that's a really pertinent one, and one of the city council's priorities. So they have a list of 3 priorities that they've determined for the calendar year. And one is the CIP and working through these projects. First is finances. I think it was second was CIP and working through these projects. And then the third is that collaboration and partnerships. So this is definitely a priority for the council. And the beauty of the CIP is, like I said, we're always updating it, and it's also the curse because it's a big document to be making changes to. But I want to point out quickly on page 5 gives you an overview of what a capital project is. It's a investment over $5,000. It's a capital expenditure is a major non-recurring budget item that results in a fixed asset with an anticipated life of at least 3 years. Per Seldovia Municipal Code, we update this plan yearly. And then if you look, where is it? I swear it said 5,000 in here, and if it doesn't, I need to update that. You'll see that a carefully prepared capital improvement program, that should be planned, has many uses. It can assist a community to anticipate community needs, rank capital improvements, and you can see they do have a priority list of priority level of 1, 2, 3, and 4. Provide a written description and justification for projects, provide the basis for funding, understand the impact of new projects, and provide a memory. And that's huge. So part of that is that we also open up and invite our local partners. So the Seldovia Recreational Service Area, Seldovia Arts Council, Seldovia Chamber of Commerce, to include either projects that they want to accomplish, which we don't have any individual projects right now listed, so that we keep the memory for them. We do have one for the Seldovia Volunteer Fire Department. So even though that's their project, we're keeping the memory of wanting to upgrade their radios. And then we also asked for feedback of projects they want to see the city to work on. So some of these came out of collaboration and working with them, and being able to refer back to the document helps us when we see open grants, and as we work forward of what those priorities are for the council. Those priority levels are in bullet point, or how those projects are prioritized is in bullet points towards the bottom of the page. To determine priority, the city council considers these questions. Will the project correct a problem that poses a clear danger to human health and safety? Will the project promote cost effectively managing core public services and or maintenance or repair of city infrastructure? Is the project specifically recommended in other City of Seldovia long-range plans? And does it align with the city's comprehensive plan? Will the project significantly enhance city revenues or prevent significant financial loss? Is the project widely supported within the community? Has the project been a priority and or in the CIP for an extended period of time? There were a few things in here that have been in here for a while that the council said, let's move that up in priority so that we can really work towards them. Most of these items have been worked on, and there are very few that aren't. There's no progress during the year. Pretty much every item is worked on in one way or another. So you can tell we're very busy. But I wanted to specifically address that something that the Planning Commission has talked about in the past is housing. And so incorporated into this plan on page 16 is rural professional housing development as a consideration. This is a planning project that would conduct some planning and feasibility study, a feasibility analysis for developing mixed housing in Seldovia to support essential professionals, including teachers, healthcare professionals, and village public safety officers, or public safety. There is a grant program out there for rural professional housing. So this was one way to kind of start addressing that need. And in speaking with the school and staff at the school and speaking with our partnership through APIA for our village public safety officers, this is a theme that keeps coming up over and over again, that housing is a incentive for professionals to come into a community. So while we keep kind of circling around this discussion because we don't want to compete with private businesses, and while housing is available in the community, it's not trying to detract or take away from those businesses. What it's trying to do is compete and attract from other communities. And we're seeing it over and over again, that if you don't have a dedicated space for professionals, they're more often going to go to a community that does offer it. So that is one thing that would be great to have feedback from the commission as we move forward. And then also you can see in here that we have some updates to some of the parks, like Susan Public Access, the Seldovia Wilderness RV Park. And we have some planning documents like the Seldovia 10-year collaborative economic strategy plan, a comprehensive plan and zoning code update and review, which this is listed on. So this is listed in here as a capital project because it could be a very big expense if we want to go at, if we don't do this in-house. And it is listed on your guys' agenda as an upcoming item because I think there were some ideas of how we could do some of this review internally. And I've got a little bit more to add on to that, but it's also in the plan just so that you guys are aware. And then, like I said, we have these special revenues. So funds that's really updating our infrastructure from the Jackloff Bay dock to the boat launch to the raw water transmission line, septic lift station repair project. Those are at the top. And those are things that are potentially going to happen within the next year. If that gives you some idea of how that's listed. And then, of course, that commitment to partnerships, those collaborative projects, the radio upgrade we're working on now, it's not prioritized. And the council elected not to, just to say that they're providing support and that they didn't need to prioritize it because they're wanting to support it. Was kind of the discussion that went on there. Also included, if I backtrack real quick, I forgot to mention that the undersurface transportation projects, the historic boardwalk repair and improvement project is included. And it's been split out previously. The historic boardwalk and the new boardwalk were combined. Now they are separate, and we're hoping to move forward and apply for a Rasmussen Foundation grant for the repairs of the existing boardwalk. And then number 4 is an alternative pedestrian transportation pathway, the Harbor Waterfront Boardwalk. And so that's a project to build out the boardwalk along the harbor. In mentioning this, one last thing, and then I'll be hoping for your guys' feedback. And like I said, I know it's a lot to tackle tonight, but as you go through it and look at it and you have feedback, please provide it to me and I will track it for future updates of the plan, as well as if you're interested in the future of going through that comprehensive plan exercise. I think that would be really beneficial. I tried to do my best and seeing what projects align, but it would be helpful to have a group be able to provide that feedback. But the last thing I wanted to mention with this plan is that just this morning we submitted a $17 million grant application that encompasses 6 components out of this plan. For a community change grant, and that includes the building out of the new boardwalk, building boardwalks along Lake Susan and up across the wetlands, a bike path from the corner of Shoreline and Jackloff to Outside Beach. I'm just trying to get people off the streets in these areas. The build out of the value added building to include a commercial DEC kitchen for a food preservation and storage program that would include freeze dryers, commercial vacuum packers, food dehydrators, an indoor fillet table station, and a walk-in freezer, so that individuals could come in and have classes or rent for a nominal fee that space in order to prepare and preserve food that's grown. A public washateria that would offer showers and washing machine and dryer at a nominal fee, office for the Seldovia Chamber of Commerce, and then rental space in that building for individuals. So we're hoping that individuals will want to come in and do a long-term lease and set up shop and have an economic development opportunity in there. I could see if that isn't feasible at first. It could be rented for events or other uses. And then it's kind of a stacking project. So in order to be able to do that, obviously, if you drive by, the city's kind of taken over that lot. In fact, we just dumped a bunch of material there that we purchased through another grant or an award through the state, because we don't have we have a small storage area up on Anderson, but it doesn't accommodate the amount of storage we need for material. It doesn't accommodate snow removal. It doesn't accommodate an indoor area for big pieces of equipment like we need. So now that the winter's here, we're going to start moving all of our equipment indoors, because those graders have to be kept warm so they don't gel and freeze in order to be able to use them. So we need space. And it's become more and more apparent as we take over this lot that's not supposed to be dedicated for government use. So in order to remove the government use from that lot, we would purchase a lot as part of this grant and build a maintenance shop that has both heated and cold storage, like bays, to put equipment in and work on it and then be able to store material. So those are 5 components. The 6th component, if you're tracking with me, is then building out that lot behind the value added building as a waterfront recreation and food security park. And it would include a high tunnel and a stage and permeable pavers or cement for water flow, natural vegetation, some green space, bringing it back to life so it's not just a dirt lot, and it can be used for events. The goal, this is a huge, if we receive this would be a huge endeavor. We have to do it within 3 years of receiving it. So that's pretty mind-boggling to think of. The goal of that space, though, is really not necessarily that it's forever going to stay that way. In discussion with the council, it's more that if we build out that value-added building, if we make the lot behind it attractive, that we can, by investing in ourselves and making that area attractive, hopefully people want to invest in us. So that's our 6th component community change grant. Wanted to update the commission on that, especially because that boardwalk piece is included. And then I would love to have any feedback you guys have on the capital improvement plan. And then, of course, as you have feedback throughout the year, definitely let me know so we can continue to track it.
So any immediate feedback?
Well, this is Stephanie. I just want to say wow and thank you guys for your hard work at the city office for putting all this together and all these grants and really really great ideas. I'm impressed with. I'm looking for. I haven't really read this document. I don't think I had access to it before the email, but I'm looking forward to reading through it in detail. And those all sound like really amazing assets to the community, and I appreciate you guys working on that.
Not really answers the question, what's going on? Board to get to work on some of that.
Well, thank you for the commissioners for your feedback, and so we will, and also thank you to everyone on the staff for all the amazing work. And I know there's a whole lot of things going on, and in between emergencies and everything else, all this stuff is being done. So thank you for doing that.
If I could point out just one more thing, I should have included that with that community change grant, that $17 million grant, we do have a statutory partner, which is required as a local organization in the community, is the Seldovia Chamber of Commerce. So they've been very supportive of it and provided a lot of feedback. And if we receive it, they'll continue to be our partner in helping us solicit public feedback and making sure that the public's aware of what's happening. And that's been a really neat collaboration.
Thank you. And then we'll continue on to staff reports.
So, yeah, for the building permits update, we've had 5 building permits this year. And I think the most recent one was it's being constructed now in the corner of Shoreline Drive, where they're putting in a 2-story, a deck with pilings and 2 stories there. And there have been a couple of other smaller building permits given out this year. And I'm not sure what other update you'd like, but
So we've had I guess, is the house on the slough, was that part of the 5 that you were thinking of? The one near the bridge?
the one near the
Or is that
bridge,
from last year?
that's a prior permit, I believe, from
Okay.
2 years ago that they're just now getting around to finish. We've had a permit for a deck and dock out by the bridge, but they've just put in the deck and dock. That property, it's if you're looking at the bridge towards the airport, it's I think 3 lots down from there.
Okay.
That's Wadsworth's property. And then there's the construction going on Shoreline Drive. And then one up by the church. And I'm blanking on the 4th one
Okay.
right now,
So
but I know it's there.
I guess, so one of the things I guess one of the things that we can see is there's development in our community, and there's ultimately that those will be, property tax revenue will be flowing into our community because people are investing in our community. So that's really amazing to see. And then just also transforming and value adding to the built infrastructure in our community. So that's really
We've
great
had
to
at
hear.
least there'll be 2 new hookups to water and sewer. 5? Okay, Hayden's correcting me. 5. 2 from current construction and some from past. And so that is adding to our revenue for the city, as well as just creating more structures and more
yeah.
property tax within the community.
Well, thank you. That's encouraging. And then the next item is upcoming open commission business.
And I can tackle the first one if you'd like. So we have been discussing the 2014 comprehensive plan and how it aligns with zoning and potentially having another review from the planning commission that would help ensure that the comprehensive plan lines up with the community desires and wants. So that is something that will be upcoming on an agenda, probably not December 4th, because it sounds like we have a lot happening at that meeting. But I want to also just include that I had a great conversation with Alaska Municipal League. Oh, I think it was yesterday, about having some technical support in this process. And this is something that they are just starting to work through. They provided support on writing the grant for Jackloff, as well as support for writing the grant for the community change grant. And it's the Alaska Municipal League is really building out their services on how they can continue to support communities in the state. And it's been pretty amazing. And so this is something that they've actually heard from a few other communities that could be helpful, as if they could provide a service to help communities review and update their plans. So I sent our plan to them. They were going to look at it and provide a a scope of services and budget, and we can talk about that. But there's potential, I guess I want to say, as we work through this, that we could have some support from the Alaska Municipal League. So wanted to provide you with that. Cedar Street is on here, and it's just, this was a good idea, and speaking with Chair Sweet, to kind of have a list of things that are happening in the background or that we need to get to. So this is one thing that I don't think we've had any movement on. I can defer to City Clerk Diamond, but just so we don't lose track that it is a ongoing business.
Yeah, we've had some pullback from interest in one of the property owners, so kind of waiting to pull back to hear back from that individual if they're still interested.
And then the Seldovia Planning Commission a year ago was something that the Chair Suite requested, that potentially that might be something great to look at, what those building permits that were approved, some of that business that you guys have accomplished, and have an overview. I believe that's the desire, right, of really, it's hard, especially when you guys have been meeting kind of sporadically, to see, and I hope you guys do realize what an impact you have. And I think that might be, I don't know if that was your goal, but to me, that's kind of inspiring, and that you can have those impacts put front and center, and see really how valuable you guys are as a commission.
If I could add one more thing into that discussion on your review, we are kind of at the point where we do need to re-up commissioners. Some people's seats need to be re-upped because they are technically 3-year terms. So if people do not want to continue or do want to continue, I'd love to have all of you guys stay on, but we would have to do something at the next meeting to make sure that we continue.
And is everybody's term identified online now? Like, I think we had talked about doing that so that that way you could actually know when I guess, is there an easy way to look to see what that is? And if not, maybe if you could send out a message that identifies all the commissioners and their term expiration. So that way people know if they need to decide anything.
Believe it applies to everybody, but yourself and Stephanie would need to decide at this point. But I will send out an email.
Yeah. I thought we had talked about this, and we had that I don't know if it's on I'll look on the planning thing, but I thought we had identified.
Yes, we did do it.
Yeah.
So it is under the Seldovia Planning Commission. So Chair Sweet, your term will end in December of 2025. Vice Chair Ryan's will end this December, as will Commissioner Kroll's. Commissioner Blanchard's term is the newest, that will end December of 2027. And Roger's term is technically already ended, so he would definitely have to renew. But that's something that we can do easy as an appointment. Just please let me know if you don't want to continue.
I might take a break.
You might want to turn your mic on.
Oh. Yeah, it's been a lot of fun and really educational and stuff like that. I might take a break.
Not yet, though, right? You'll be on December 4th. Hold on.
Yeah.
Could advertise if you guys want us to.
Probably a good idea, just for continuous sort of succession planning, to do that.
Yep, and I'll check in with Commissioner Ryan, who's not here, and then make sure that she's on board to stay as well.
Thank you.
Sorry to interrupt. Speaking of breaks, I actually have to get going. We're almost done though, right?
Yeah, I think we're just I think we're close to yeah, we're just we're just about to adjourn. We just have a couple of things to do, but that should be very quick. So whatever you need to do, we'll
Yeah.
move forward. and-
Okay,
Thank you. Okay, so we have, there's information about city office, closing and city council meeting, and municipal league and city office, staffing that are listed on items 1 through 4 there. On the items not requiring action, so, I think we can, and then comments of the public. I don't think we have any more public. And then comments of the commission. Do any of the commissioners have any comments?
I want to thank, city clerk and you guys, it's very, it's a lot of work to do. You guys are doing a good job, I think.
Thank you.
I want to second that.
Yeah, that's great.
Thank you. And then our next scheduled meeting, as we talked about, is on December 24th. And the last item is we'll go ahead and adjourn.
Need a motion?
Need a motion to adjourn.
I'll make a motion to adjourn.
And a second.
I'll second that.
Thank you. We are adjourned. It is 8:28. Thank you for your perseverance.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, everyone.